Well, good afternoon, freedom fighters and Alberta patriots. Welcome to another edition of Alive at 5 with Paul. We've got a very exciting guest today, Gillian Davis, with her new book, Wexit, The Reluctant Rebellion. When I first read the title, I was kind of, that's kind of interesting. But after reading the book and going through it, and again, talking to so many Albertans, there is a lot of reluctance on where we should go and what we should be doing. And so I'm just thrilled to have Gillian on to share her insights in writing this book. But boy, I can't emphasize enough that I would like every Albertan to read this. I'd like it to be in our schools and high school students reading this to understand the history of Alberta a little bit more and why we're in this situation that we're in. But I'm going to go back and say what I've said so many times in my previous rambles, is that the problem that we're dealing with is a flawed constitution, a divisive constitution, one that allows bullying. Yet that's the biggest thing that we talk about in our school and everything else. Oh, there shouldn't be any bullying. We should all be equal. We need to be fair. We need to have respect. All of those issues which every human being wants and deserves and should have, yet we fail to achieve those here in Canada. And I say in part, a lot of that is because of our Constitution and the way politicians can divide and conquer us and turn one group against another group, to turn one area against another area, one industry against another industry. And it's always a game of politics, divide and conquer. And it's been detrimental, it's been very harmful, and it's gone on since the inception of this country. But what I'd like to do is to actually bring Gillian on and say hello. Gillian, are you there?
I am here.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on. And I'm going to start off with the tough question. Why did you write this book?
Well, I wrote it, it was just after the 2019 election, and I wrote it to give people something in their hands that was a relatively simple read, but that packed a big punch, and to give them that information that they can actually take to other people and explain that to them in an easy way. What's been going on, that this is not just because of the 2019 election. This has been going on since the beginning of the country, and certainly from the beginning of the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan, and Manitoba for that effect.
Yeah, well, that's again, it's fascinating to me. Your title, The Reluctant Rebellion. Tell me how you came up with that name.
Well, it seems that there are a lot of people that are reluctant. They know something's wrong. They don't like what's going on, but it's kind of like that situation where it's like, if Ottawa would just leave us alone and we could just get on with what we want to get done, then everything would be fine. But that we're getting into this situation again that is pushing people to the point where there's no opportunity just to get on with things. Therefore, we've got to do something. But people still are reluctant to get involved. They're reluctant to sort of, I guess, pull the ripcord and go, okay, had enough, we're done. I think it's becoming less reluctant over time as things keep progressing in the wrong direction. But there are still people that are just not sure what to do.
Yeah, no, so true. And that, just as you were speaking, it reminded me of that one line in your book. I can't remember who it was that asked if they just take the handcuffs off. Who do you remember that? Who did you quote on that one?
That was actually one of the Brown brothers out of Nisku, Alberta.
Yep.
The fellow owns a business there, and he said, like, we'll give you the money, just let us do what we do.
Yep.
Oh,
no, and I just thought, like I say, it was you were saying that just to remind me of that quote of just take off the handcuffs. But now it's not just the handcuffs; it's a ball and chain, and I mean it's in a jail cell. You can't do these things, and the abuse. To me, is just I just can't believe how high and how fast it's escalated since Justin has got in, and again as he's doubling down here going forward. But anyways, let's get into it. And I kind of wanted to jump ahead and maybe if you want to say something before that, but the first quote that I kind of wanted to go back to is with Sir John A. Macdonald, and saying that, those poor, I should actually get the quote. I don't have it written down. I just have but I think he said those poor peasants don't know that they've just been sold, and are now part of the Laurentian elite. But can you comment on that first transition from where we were belonging to the Hudson Bay to all of a sudden we're Canadians?
Well, that was kind of incendiary the way that you put it, but essentially what he said, because I don't remember the quote exactly off the top of my head, but essentially what he said was that the land has been sold to us, and the people have been handed over like sheep. And that's kind of, I think the attitude of the East is that they bought this piece of property and the people that are on it are as much chattel as whatever else belongs to the land. And we see that quite often, I think for us in Alberta in particular, whenever it comes to our resources. Each province is supposed to own and have control over their own resources. And yet the oil industry, probably because it's so lucrative, is looked at almost separately. So where all of the provinces put in their tax money, which is, I mean, you can argue with it, but it's basically fair that we all contribute tax money into the running of the country. However, when it comes to resources in the oil industry, it's almost as if that anything that comes out of particularly the prairies is owned almost separately from resources in other provinces. So like Quebec has their electricity, their hydroelectric stuff, that's theirs. And everybody accepts that's theirs. But oil and gas, somehow, that's all of Canada's.
Yeah. And we'll get into that more further down with the National Energy Program of 1980, because you go into quite a bit of detail there, and talk about, the I guess the actions. But I'll actually read the words exactly as you've got it in the book here, from Sir John A. All these poor people know is that Canada has bought the country from the Hudson Bay Company, and that they are handed over like a flock of sheep to us. These words are haunting today, considering some of the attitudes towards Western prairies. And so, yeah, I just, like I say, you get so many just golden nuggets throughout this book that for people to come to a knowledge, to realize that, oh wow, like seriously, that's what they thought of. And again, going back to 1905 and signing on, I don't know that you had that in the book here specifically. But, the resources were exempt, and it wasn't until 1930 when Premier Brownlee got resources transferred, Crown land and the resources to provincial jurisdiction. And again, like they literally they took that on, and it was to the benefit of the Easterners on why they bought it. And it was also, I didn't realize, but the Queen was actually putting pressure on the Hudson Bay Company to sell it at a discount, because the Americans had offered more to sell it to Eastern Canada, which I found, like, again, very enlightening.
We have to remember at that time, the Americas still, like all of the states hadn't joined the United States at that time. So everything was kind of in flux. So, and the United States, it was after the Boston Tea Party and all of that, but Canada was still part of Britain. So they were trying to secure, to make sure that they had as much property and as much land as they could maintain, not to mention British Columbia, it kind of says it in the name, was British. So they wanted to tie that far west and the east together. So it just made sense to buy the prairies.
Yeah.
But it was the Queen putting on pressure to the Hudson's Bay Company, which was a British company.
Yeah. Can you give us a little bit of history on why the Hudson Bay owned all that territory and why it didn't belong to the Queen at that time?
Well, it was a matter of different. It's sort of a long history, but in as condensed a package as I can put it. Whenever different people came, like it was the era of exploration. So what happened was that different generally European countries set out to try to explore different places and bring back whatever they could to enrich their own countries. So for the most part, Canada had a lot of furs. They had a lot of different resources, but the furs were the big things. So what happened was there were French and British traders that came in and they set up companies.
Yeah.
And the Hudson's Bay Company was one of those companies that was, they sort of took over the territory and made agreements with the native people and what have you. And so that's how they came to sort of own that territory over time. They sort of laid claim to it.
Yeah, well, I found it fascinating. Like I say, it's something I don't really understand good enough. But like even Alberta, when they were opening up and they wanted, people to come and settle, they gave a quarter section of land. I mean, Canada gave away vast areas of land to get the railway built. And again, so, and Canada ended up, owning those royalties because they bought into those corporations. But yeah, it's quite amazing when you look back at that. But the other one that, again, can you give us a little more explanation? But you talk about in 1956, Louis St. Laurent government passed the Federal Pipeline Act. You don't go into it very much in the book. Can you expand a little bit on the Federal Pipeline Act and what that did for Alberta and Canada as a whole?
Well, that one is another one of those kind of complicated acts that they put in, essentially trying to control the oil as it was coming out of the ground. So again, it's just been this constant attempt to own the resources without actually owning them. Because, and I do mention it in the book that in 1930, Brownlee did get those resources back into the province's hands. Part of the reason for the federal government claiming those resources was because the railway had to be paid for and the land had to be paid for. Well, I make the point in the book that I think it's paid in full, but and then some. But that act was, it is a complicated situation because what happened at the same time, it was Preston Manning's father, actually, who is the premier of Alberta at the time, who understood what was trying to be done. And so he did his best to prevent what was happening. And basically it was so that the federal government could control those resources. They could control it if they can get the pipelines and have ownership of the pipelines, then they can control those resources and the movement of those resources.
Yeah, and again, Ernest C. Manning put together, gosh, I can't remember the name of that company. Is it TransAlta Gas but
I can't
anyways,
even remember now.
It eventually became TC Energy though, TransCanada, but Nova Gas, maybe it was Nova Gas, but yeah, that again sparks another memory in my mind when you bring that up. I think that again though, I want to go with your quote on page 17, that all Alberta wanted was a fair market price for its oil. But you got the quote in here. The thing that must be remembered here is that oil is a commodity that affects every aspect of the supply chain. Without reasonable priced fuel, industry and modern life grinds to a standstill. And boy, I just can't think how critical that is right now with all of the actions that are being taken against oil and gas here in Alberta to the detriment of Canada as a whole. But yet they just don't seem to care. It's like shooting yourselves in the foot before you have to run a race. Like seriously, what Canadian wouldn't think of the benefit that, wow, we can be energy independent, we can be competitive.
And that was the goal in the 70s.
Yes, yeah, and such an opportunity. But anyways, it's just I think that's something that every Canadian just doesn't understand. But how it is. It just affects the supply chain on pretty much everything and anything that we have, and why national energy security is so important, but yet they want to shut it down and be dependent on oil and gas from rogue nations that have very little, if any, human rights respect at all. But
it makes no sense, because I maintain that if you really are an environmentalist and you really care about the environment, you should be a champion of Alberta oil and gas,
Yes.
because it's here that innovations are created and shared with the rest of the world. And the reason that it's so good to test some of these ideas out in Alberta is because of how harsh our climate is and the way that the resources have to be extracted. We're cutting edge because of that.
Yeah.
And that is helping other countries become more environmentally friendly, because we're finding out ways, like best practices in how to extract the oil. So again, if you really are sincerely interested in being a champion of the environment, you should be an absolute cheerleader for Alberta oil and gas.
Yeah, no, and it just seems like such common sense, that yet we have the Easterners just turning against us, because it's like that. I don't know. They've never wanted us to be successful. They don't want the money here. They don't want the power here. You know, on the bottom of page 17, you go into the National Energy Program, and you quote in here that it's been estimated that it cost Albertans between $50 and $100 billion. The National Energy Program has been one of, if not the biggest factors in creating the deep resentment in Alberta towards Ottawa. The official argument, again, is that, you know, this is for the benefit of all of Canada, and to redistribute the proceeds of Alberta's energy will benefit all Canadians, which absolutely, you know, there's no question that, you know, the $600 billion that we've contributed in the last 40 years has been to the benefit of all Canadians. But you kind of forget, you know, it's been so long, you forget a lot of the details. But one of the things that you put here in the book was the Petroleum Incentive Program. Can you talk a little bit about the problems of that, and how, again, those same government interventions causing us grief again today?
Well, yeah, it seems to be an issue. It's one of those things like, okay, where do we start? Some of the stuff that was going on, because there was a lot of different little pieces that were put in there. So some of the issues were that the federal government was, first of all, they had put together Petro-Canada, which was a federal government-owned company that was trying to get a foothold into the oil and gas industry. And they had unlimited resources at their disposal, which meant that competition was basically wiped out. Why would a private company come in and invest money whenever their biggest competitor is the federal government? The other thing that was done was that they were giving incentives to do oil exploration in other places outside of Alberta. So what that basically meant was that those other places would get the money instead of Alberta. So instead of, you know, going for the sure bet of Alberta oil, which we already knew was there, that's seeping out of the ground, no, they wanted to go and see if they could find it in other places, basically to take the attention and the investment and what have you out of Alberta. And I think what's happening now, it's kind of this situation, well, if we can't have it, nobody can. So if they can't extract it, if they can't essentially steal it, then what they're going to do is shut it down so that we can't benefit from it either.
Yeah, if we
At
can't
least
have
in my opinion.
No, I agree. If we can't have the chicken barn, we're going to burn it. We're not going to let them collect the eggs or anything else. And again, you know, Justin has been so emphatic that he wants to shut down the oil sands. He said it many times, and he's doing a phenomenal. That's the only thing to me that he's doing good is succeeding on his goal on wanting to shut down the oil sands.
Yeah, because he didn't even do a really good job of legalizing marijuana, which was his other pet project. So
he did get it done, though. I'll give him credit for that.
He got it done. Not well, but he got it done. The oil sands, he's doing a really good job on that one.
Yeah. Yep. No. Excellent. Let's see here. Oh boy, what do we want to go to? I guess what I wanted to jump on to next I have here is when they entrenched equalization in the new Constitution Act of 1982, and again how this all just plays into the same thing, you know, rob the West and pay the rest. It just carries on. But the equalization was originally brought in 1957. You have in here, it all sounded good, but the NEP coupled with equalization was a huge transfer of wealth. Do you want to expound a little bit on that and how the two overlap, the NEP and the new constitution?
Well, so the new Constitution of 1982 it's just filled with flaws. And I mean, right now it doesn't seem to matter anyway, because the Supreme Court have basically said, with this whole legalizing the carbon tax because of some existential threat, um, that the Constitution really is meaningless anyway.
Yep.
However, a lot of the problems started in 1982 whenever Pierre Elliott Trudeau patriated the Constitution, because what wound up happening was that that Constitution was supposed to be fixed later, and it never has been. Brian Mulroney tried to fix it twice and couldn't, because he can't get agreement. And the only way they got agreement in 1982 was kind of some cloak and dagger stuff that went on. But what happens with the equalization, there's a lot of economists that call it a poverty trap, because what it does is it de-incentivizes hard work and incentivizes kind of fiddling with the numbers and trying to find ways. There was a story that I heard about in Newfoundland, how some people were actually being paid to move concrete blocks from one side of the road to the other to give them something to do, so that they could actually get more equalization. And it's just the way that these things have been developed. It's making people, for example, in the Maritimes, not explore what they can do to be more competitive in the world, and what they can do to exploit their resources or come up with new technologies or whatever, because if they make too much money, they're out equalization money.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to just get money from the government, like the West sending you money. And the thing that's always brought up is that it's not Alberta that pays Quebec $13 billion in equalization. It's all of Canada. Yeah, but then you have to look at who's actually contributing to equalization and who's getting out of equalization. Yeah. And there is a huge, huge disparity in this country.
Yeah, no, there's been some great articles put out there. I think that we've been averaging $4,500 for every man, woman, and child in Alberta. That basically goes to Quebec. I mean, there's a little bit that goes to the Northwest Territories, and people will say, oh, but the Northwest Territories gets $32,000 per person. Quebec only gets $7,000, or can't remember the numbers for sure. But Quebec has been the huge benefactor, and again, the redistribution of this has been solely to buy votes in other parts of the country. And again, the way the formula works, like you say, that there's no incentive to develop your own resources when you can get them from Alberta, through cash transfers. Why would you want to set them up? And again, it's just infuriating when people read them. I can't remember the name of one book that was put out by the economic group in the East. I'm drawing a blank right now on it, but I'll probably remember it later. But anyways, equalization has certainly been a problem. Like you say in the book here, it got entrenched in 1982. Up until then, it wasn't really entrenched, but then it was. On page 21, you jump into here, and again, I'm jumping along, but you talk about the green plank, a vision of Canada rooted in our land and environment, committed to sustainable economic development. And then it's just so important. No economic development without regard to long-term environmental costs and implications. No environmental regulations without regard to economic costs and social implications. And that second part of it just seems to be missing in today's discussion. And then you go on and do some great discussion on the environment and the problems there. But you want to share a few thoughts on the green plank and what your research has shown?
Well, the Green Plank was part of the Reform Party's original Blue Book. So all of that, there's actually, I think there's 4 different planks that I talk about
Yeah, you talk
in the
about the
book.
people plank, the bread and butter plank, the constitutional reform.
Yeah. So that all came from the Reform Party Blue Book. I think, let me think here. I think it was 1986 that one came out. 86, 87?
1988.
1988. Okay. I was close.
Sort.
A lot of dates going on in the
Yes,
head.
yes.
But yeah, the Reform Party had a very sensible plank. And the thing that we have to remember is that what quite often is said in the East is that the West doesn't care about the environment. And I say that is, you couldn't get further from the truth, because I have found most Albertans are very much consciously aware of the environment. We have this beautiful area. I currently live in Calgary. I look out my window and there's the Rocky Mountains right there. So we're very aware of nature and how important it is. But we're also very practical people, and we know that we need to extract resources, we need to build things, we need to be able to feed ourselves and heat our homes and do these things, but we do it in as responsible a way as we possibly can. As far as the environment is concerned, I think what keeps getting missed here is that there's not a lot we can do about the climate, but there's a lot we can do about the environment, meaning pollution.
Yes.
Let's talk about these things and come up with sensible solutions, like Albertans tend to do anyway. But let's spread that out to these other places that are going a little hysterical here. And let's start talking about actual practical solutions that we can do to clean up the environment without destroying our livelihoods and our way of life. If we continue on the program that we're currently on, what's going to wind up happening is the environment isn't going to get any better, but a lot of people are going to probably go hungry or jobless or wind up freezing to death because they can't get access to the resources that they need just to survive.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting to me when you look around the world that the poorest regions are all areas that don't have access to clean, efficient energy. And I've said it many times, I'll continue to say it. If we really cared about these countries, what we should be doing is sending them propane in refillable bottles that would enhance their lives so much. But yet here we have a prime minister who wants to shut down our oil and gas industry. And again, it's to the detriment of the world. The Modern Miracle Network, again, talks a lot about the miracle of energy and carbon and what a benefit it's been to humanity, and yet we're demonizing it here, and so it really is frustrating. But you go on and you talk a lot about Chrétien, and again, he was part of the henchmen of Prime Minister Trudeau and working in there. But the one quote here, I'm not sure what page I'm on now. Where am I at? Page 22. Perhaps Chrétien's most egregious assault on those outside of Ontario and Quebec was the passing of the 1996 Regional Veto Act. That this gives Quebec veto over any constitutional changes. And what fascinated me the most with this, and still bothers me to this day, is that Quebec has never signed on to the 1982 Constitutional Act, but yet they have a veto over it. Like, are you kidding me? Some of these things
doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it's just bizarre. A province that won't even sign it, but yet they have the Veto Act. What you want to expound on that Veto Act a little bit more and share that with Albertans so that they understand the dilemma that we're in with that, and why our Constitution isn't working.
Well, basically what happened when the 1982 Constitution was brought in, Peter Lougheed actually was the one that fought vigorously to ensure that if constitutional changes were going to be made, that they would be made fairly. Unfortunately, when Chrétien came along, what he wound up doing was changing things up so that it sort of regionalized the country. So you have the Maritimes made up of Newfoundland, PEI, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick are sort of one regional block. Ontario and Quebec are two separate. So that's 3 regional blocks. And then you have the West and the Territories, I think, are all part of another regional block. And then you have BC as another regional block. So what winds up happening, and I have to try to remember my math on this, but I think it's that you have to get 3 out of the 4 maritime provinces to agree. You have to get Quebec and Ontario to agree, Vancouver, and 2 out of the 3 prairie provinces. So, and it has to make up a certain amount of and I can't remember what the percentage is of the population out of each of those areas, 50% out of each of these different parts. Yeah. And so what essentially happens is if Quebec disagrees, then Ontario will just go along for the ride because they'll automatically give Quebec that veto because it's almost like an unspoken rule between the two of them. If one doesn't agree, then the other one will join forces. And because they have the most population in the country, then they have the vote. Yeah. So again, it centralizes all power to Ontario and Quebec. And I wouldn't even say, quite frankly, that the outlying areas, like the more rural Ontario and Quebec areas, completely agree with what's happening in what's commonly referred to as the Golden Triangle. But they have no more choice than the rest of us because the population is there, and that's where the resources go. That's where the seats are. And so that's where politicians are focused on. We don't have a lot of say outside of that Golden Triangle. So no. I wouldn't even blame all Quebecers or all Ontarians. I think it's a matter of a very condensed area that has the say in what happens throughout the entire country. And because of that, now that that act that Chrétien put through is actually unconstitutional. And I'm smiling as I say that because, the Constitution doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot. But if someone were to fight it, they could potentially overthrow that.
Yeah. No, I like to just call it the Wolf Act, and that's where the 7 wolves get to vote to eat the lambs of this 5 sheep. And again, it's just notorious for the way it's setting up to be a divisive country. And like you say, it's not even that you want that rural Quebec or rural Ontario, any of the rural areas, realize that the problem because they're outside, like you say, the Golden Triangle. And again, for me, what is so wrong is this is the epitome of central government and why it doesn't work. And whether it's centralized in Edmonton, centralized in Ottawa, or centralized in the East, the one size fits all doesn't work. And where you need to have the division of power and the division of the tax dollars. And I personally would like to see tax dollars being collected locally, kept for what they need at the local level of the municipality or the town, and then it's sent on to the province for what it needs, and then sent to Ottawa. And instead it's upside down. It all goes to Ottawa. They strip us of everything that we have, and then we beg and choose, we beg and apply for grants to get money back, to whether it's for clean water or for our facilities of whatever type we need, for our roads, our infrastructure. And we're always, like, oh, isn't it so wonderful, that Ottawa and Alberta are coming together to give us a grant to upgrade this road or to build this school, when in fact that money has come from those communities.
Well, even that, it's we give them the money, which we don't have to do according to the Constitution. But whenever they send it back to us, not only do they send us our own money back, but they're also telling us exactly, precisely what we can do with it.
Yeah. No.
So the will of the local people is completely ignored for what Ottawa wants us to do.
Yeah, it always amazes me, and I can't remember, again, this is stirring all kinds of memories here, but they come up with a new grant system, and the number one need that a town might need to do is to upgrade its water treatment facility or its sewage facility. But oh no, the new program coming out, it has to be with recreational facilities, or it has to be, some new environmental green project. And I can't help but thinking of the double-decker buses in Edmonton. That was a new innovative idea but again, the priorities of the communities are just disregarded for the political whims of buying votes. And it's always to the detriment of the local people, though. But it's just the game that we continue to play. And again, you talk about it, and I'll read this quote. The same. Well, let's go here. The same federal politicians who accuse us of not sharing their Canadian values have no compunction about appropriating Canadian dollars to buy votes elsewhere in the country. And again, that really is the problem that we have, and the divisiveness. I remember I was speaking at a function a couple of weeks ago, and there was quite a few people in the room. But I said, I'll show you a blatant example of mob rule, or what I call is the tyranny of the majority is no different than tyranny of the one. But anyways, all the people in the room, there were 4 people wearing cowboy hats, and I just says, oh, let's have a vote for who's got to buy supper tonight, and let's say the people with the cowboy hats have to do it. And all the hands went up, and it was an 80 to 20%, 80% voted in favor of that. And to me, that's the problem with our Constitution, is it allows for the people to vote, and say, oh yeah, we'll vote for that. And again, you bring that up here, and how many times it causes problems here. But let's see, I want to jump ahead to page 31 here, was the next one that I had down here, under the butterfly kisses that you talk about here. But oh yes, yeah, this was an interview in 2010 by the Liberal MP of Justin Trudeau. Do we know that guy? He was interviewed on Tele-Quebec, and he says, Canada isn't doing well right now because it's Albertans who control our community and social democratic agenda. He later stated that he used Alberta as shorthand for Stephen Harper. Again, the divisiveness of this Eastern elitist sneering at us, you have in the book here, it is amazing. And then you've got this quote, and I want you to expand on this a little bit. But in 2014, the Supreme Court of Canada was deemed Policy Maker of the Year by the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. You want to share a little bit about that? And because this judicial activism is it's killing us.
It is, and we've seen evidence of that in what has just been done with the carbon tax. Yeah, it's not, they have so much as said that they are going against the Constitution because of their activism. As far as I'm concerned, the Supreme Court, and I get really irate about this, so forgive me if I go on a rant.
Oh, but please do.
The Supreme Court of Canada. The Supreme Court of Canada, their one job is to protect the Constitution. And they have failed to do that. 6 out of those 9 judges did not do their job. They threw out the Constitution because of an ideology, and they didn't even have to prove it.
Yep.
They didn't use any facts. They didn't use any science. They didn't use anything. Just this announcement or pronouncement of an existential threat. And therefore, our laws, our supreme laws in this country, no longer are in effect in this instance, which means that our Constitution is not worth anything more than toilet paper, for crying out loud, because if you can throw out the supreme law of a country, what laws can be upheld?
Oh, that's the whole problem. It makes me want to bring up my Constitution here, because that's what it is that we recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And when we've thrown those out, it's anarchy. It's might is right. Tyranny of the majority. And again, it's legal, and they can go on and do it. And it's just incredibly frustrating.
And for people not to be standing up at this point and saying, no, this is not okay, that you cannot throw out our Constitution, as flawed as it may be. If
Yeah.
you can throw that out, that's inexcusable as far as I'm concerned. Whether you're talking about from a provincial standpoint or from a Canadian standpoint, Canadians, all Canadians, even in the environmentalists that buy into the environmental crisis, they should be outraged as well, because that Constitution is meant to protect us. And it means that we have, as citizens in this country, no protection from the judiciary or from our government.
Yeah, no, it's just so divisive and so wrong. And again, imposing that carbon tax, which is detrimental to Canadians' energy, to our moving forward, and it just undermines our economy in such a way of is putting a ball and chain on there.
And to all Canadians, not just Albertans, to all Canadians.
Yes.
Including it affects our food supply. It affects all of our supply chain,
Yeah.
because everything has this tax on it now. But what is that tax doing? You can't throw money at a problem and think it's going to fix it, especially when it's this weird kind of Ponzi scheme where they take the money and then give it back to us. That makes no sense at all.
No.
So what are they really trying to achieve?
Well, what they're trying to do is to undermine the energy industry. And again, what they don't seem to realize, and you said it in the book and you just said it now, it affects every aspect of our supply chain. This is a tax on the well-being and I want to say the prosperity of Canadians as a whole, and not there. Oh, great. I was just going to say, you need to put that up there, David, so thank you. Wexit, The Reluctant Rebellion. Go to Amazon and look that up. Excellent read. And again, it's just powerful for people that are reluctant about the autonomy and the sovereignty of Alberta. This is as a go-to book, and we can't thank Gillian enough for writing it. And then more important, to come on and sharing that with us. I guess I want to go and jump in here, because you talk a lot about, the Northern Gateway pipeline and the Western oil producers, but jumping down to, and again, it's just so true. Actions speak louder than words, and Justin Trudeau's actions are screaming hypocrisy and classism. I wonder where Oscar Wilde Portrait of Justin Trudeau is hidden. I'm betting it is a pretty hideous sketch. And then you go on with his Freudian slip in his 150th birthday celebration, where he mentioned all of the provinces and territories. But do you think that it was an actual slip or an intention, knowing the history of him and his father and everything else, where he failed to mention Alberta?
I honestly don't think it matters. I think, honestly, whether he is conscious of his bias against the West or not, I think he probably is, but I don't think it matters. I think that it was done. I also bring out the salmon arm salute. I talk about that in the book.
I was just going to go on to it, because it's amazing, because as we know, it's Teflon Trudeau, and how much that he's got away with. And again, the one that just blew me away is when he personally attacked Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jan Philpott, over the SNC Lavalin scandal. I actually really at that point thought that, wow, here's two outstanding ladies that are going to stand up, and the party won't support Justin anymore. And yet they got thrown under the bus. And then you talk about the other lady that just had enough and she left, and just his attitude. But this, I've got to read this sentence you have in here as well. The self-declared feminist PM who insisted on a gender-based rather than merit-based cabinet couldn't hide his misogynistic ways any longer. And then, you go on and again, re-emphasize all of the things that he's done that are just, I don't know what the right word is you describe it, Gillian, but it's just so frustrating to me. And then you talk about that military veteran in Edmonton that he just kind of, offended and acted like, well, you haven't done anything for this country, and why would we look it towards you when there's so many other injustices going on? And just such a hypocrite. And again, the classism that he promotes is truly, truly frustrating.
It's ugly.
And then you went on, like I say, you just covered so many here, but I've got to read this one too. But Trudeau's tasteless behavior continued when he dropped the writ for the 2019 election on the 18th anniversary of 9/11. So many of these things I've actually forgotten about, but reading your book brings it back, and so frustrating. But you put one in here that I didn't know about, and I want to bring out to people. But Adam Menzies, in 2018, he actually had his Twitter account permanently suspended. I didn't realize his censorship was going back at that point here in Canada. But maybe share a little bit about the censorship and again what you got here in the book.
There's two people that I mention in the book. Both of them are vloggers.
Yep.
So they're YouTube personalities. One of them is Mark Perolovis. He was running for the PPC party in 2019, and he had his Twitter account suspended for a period of time, which goes against election rules. He did get it back, but it did cost him, I'm not sure if it was 3 days or a week, but it did cost him precious time during an election to not have access to tweeting about where he was going to be and the different debates he was that he was participating in and what have you. So it seems like there is this censorship that's been going on for some time, whether we've been fully aware of it or not. The other one that Adam Daniel Mazet, he had these, and I mean, it's a little incendiary the way that he put it. He called them Trudeau's crimes, which, okay. But at the same time, he's a citizen of Canada. He has every right to talk about his frustration with the government of the time, and to say why he doesn't think that they should be elected next time around. That is, as far as my understanding of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, is our right as citizens of this country. He wasn't saying to kill Trudeau. He wasn't inciting violence in any way. He wasn't doing any of those things that we would all agree are not okay. He was just saying pretty much the same stuff that I say in the book.
Yep.
That, these are the different things that Trudeau has done. He was calling them crimes. Call them what you will.
Well, they're crimes against Canadians. I'm going to read your quote here at the end of all of this, because this is really the crux of the situation. Freedom of expression is one of our charter rights and one of our most fundamental of human rights. If we cannot speak, we cannot think. If we cannot think, we cannot grow and evolve as humans. This brings me back to the environmental crisis. How do we fix a thing if it cannot be discussed fulsomely? No science is never settled, and yet we are forced to agree with the notion because to question any aspect of it is tantamount to blasphemy. This is dangerous. As the world was busy hyperventilating over foreign interference. Well, let's stop there for a minute before I go into the next one there. But I mean, to me, I just, that paragraph is so important in your whole book there. Because that's one of the problems that we're having. We're having it with COVID now. We have it with the climate crisis and all the names that it's evolved with. And again, the censorship is just shocking to me that Albertans and Canadians aren't saying no more. But as a journalist and a writer, share your feelings a little bit more on that, though. These are pretty succinct.
I am infuriated. I am a free speech. I can't express how fundamental the freedom of expression is. It goes back to some of the classic principles that go all the way back to John Locke and a free society. If you don't have the ability to test ideas and discuss ideas completely and fully, there cannot be any progress. Yeah. It is such a dangerous situation that we're in. There was something that was said a number of years ago, and I don't remember who it was that said it, but they had said that whatever you can't talk about is what controls you.
Oh,
So
excellent.
the fact that we can't talk about climate change and we can't talk about COVID means that whoever is making the money out of those things, and because it's the standard investigation, always follow the money.
Yeah.
So you have billionaires getting even richer from selling carbon offsets. People who are getting absolutely disgustingly wealthy from some of the pharmaceutical stuff that's being pushed. Pushed may be an incendiary way of putting it as well, but
Well,
you get the idea. I mean,
well,
there are people getting
mean,
grossly rich.
we're not allowed to have a discussion on it. And what's frustrated me over and over again, and again, the amount of YouTube videos that are going down and stuff where doctors are talking about treatment for COVID. And I'm not going to talk about the drugs and the vitamins and everything else because again, you end up getting these things pulled. But there is treatment for it, but yet our governments refuse to talk about it. And there are pollutions that we want to absolutely address. But yet, two of our biggest pollutants, Victoria and Montreal, just pump their sewage raw out, and we're doing nothing. And just think of the money that they spend attacking the oil and gas industry. We could clean up two of our biggest polluters in our country and do more good. But there's just a complete refusal because, as you pointed out here, we're not allowed to speak about the censorship. And again, those individuals, those vloggers, that like I said, I didn't realize that the accounts were being suspended that far back here in Canada. And again, like you say, to go after Mark, a political campaigner, it's just unbelievable, and yet there's never any repercussions on it. But let's jump into the next political problem here, because again, you've brought this out in the book. And as the world was busy hyperventilating over foreign interference in elections, mainly the USA we're talking about, Canada invited an influential foreign environmental activist to speak in Edmonton, supporting the platform of policies of several of the parties. And who else we talking about? I want to say the abused little Swedish girl, Greta Thunberg. And I think if you want to talk about crimes against the children, the next generation, the fear that's been instilled in her and the trauma, it's criminal. And so I'll use that term that the crimes that are being used. But share a little bit about the Thunberg episode, if you don't mind.
Sure. I feel I watched Greta Thunberg speak at the EU, and you can see that little girl is absolutely terrified. I mean, some people say she's not a little girl anymore, but she was a little girl whenever she started this. And she is someone who has mental challenges. And I'm not saying that to be derogatory. My mom was a nurse that she both worked with geriatrics and with those who were mentally challenged. So I see great goodness in people with mental challenges, but they're also susceptible to being manipulated. And that's what's happened to this young girl. And it's absolutely shameful. I can understand from the parents' point of view that some of the things that were happening because of this attention she was getting actually helped her overcome some of her challenges. But at the same time, they're allowing her to be absolutely terrified about this situation, because I don't want to call it a crisis, but they're allowing that to happen, and they're actually feeding that frenzy that has gone around, has sort of surrounded her this whole time, and it's very concerning because, of course, other kids are buying into it. Now, when Greta came to Edmonton, I happened to be in the city at the time, and I went to the rally. And it seemed like there were a few incidences that happened that I talk about in the book that absolutely floored me. But one of them that really, it hurt to see it happen, was that here were all these people that came to see Greta. And when Greta finished speaking, they all started piling out of the legislative grounds, even though Chubby Cree was performing. There were other speakers that were talking about the environment. But it was like everybody came for this sort of fan fest. It just didn't feel like it had anything to do with environmental concerns. It was more about coming to see Greta.
Yeah.
Which was really concerning, because if you really care about the environment, why aren't you listening to the other speakers as well?
Yeah.
And then another one that I just honestly I thought was funny was a guy who absolutely became hysterical and went to the police because there were two guys in suits kind of standing in the back, because I was sort of at the back beside some of the
Yeah.
police, and these two guys were in suits and ties, and this other guy, this I guess environmentalist guy, decided that they must be working for oil and gas companies and had no right to be there, which was just
It's
because
bizarre.
it is, and the kind of thinking that would produce that kind of thought. We're standing on the legislature grounds. They could have been politicians for all we know, or assistants to politicians. Downtown Edmonton, there's office buildings all around there. Like, it was just bizarre. And how upset this man was just crazy.
Yeah, I found it fascinating reading about that when you put in the book and the reactions that were going on there. Again, I just have to read your one again quote here out of the book, because this really is the problem. The point is that Greta Thunberg was just given a platform to condemn Western industry, which was a major platform policy of four of the main parties running in the 2019 election. How is this not considered foreign interference in a federal election? Shouldn't she have been made to wait until after the election? And there was lots of outcries of that during that, and the bringing of her here, and who was paying for her transportation, and how was she getting here, and how was she getting back, and all of that was certainly a problem that was never addressed. And again, talk about foreign interference. It was just phenomenal. And again, like you say, it really was a cult following almost, this mentality that went on there. But I just want to do another reading, a quote here from your book about the environment. We are missing the target when we refuse to talk about solutions to pollution and unnecessary waste, a problem Alberta oil sands and Albertans generally care deeply about and have been innovating for decades to address, and instead focus on climate, which is most likely beyond our control. Again, you just write some eloquent paragraphs in here talking about the transformation from, I guess, global warming to climate change to climate crisis, and on it goes. And again, you say these predictions of doom and echo doomsday cult in two ways. They make people so fearful that they'll do anything the cult leaders ask them, and their predictions of doom never come to pass, and yet the damage they can do lasts indefinitely. And I just think that that's so true, Gillian, that the damage that's being done, how many years did it take after the NEP in 1980, and what could we have done? And again, going back to 2008, we had 5 upgraders that wanted to build upgraders here in the province. And again, we see tech pulled out this last year because of government policies, and yet we have the arrogance of our political leaders to say, oh, it's because we're not walking the right steps, we're not chewing our gum correctly as we walk down the street when it comes to the environment. But as you say, that Albertans have been innovative. Our harsh environment here, where we have to go to get it, it's just been a benefit to the world to be able to reach it in other places, and yet our own people are fighting against us. But
none
any
of it's
comments on
appreciated.
that?
Well, none of it's appreciated. We're on the bleeding edge of technology, trying to make things better, and it's just not appreciated. It's not understood. Whenever you have someone like Gerald Butts coming out saying that the oil has to stay in the ground, it's insanity. And I did a lot of traveling over the last couple of years and mentioned some of these things to people in other countries. And they're like, if it's in the ground, get it out. What are you doing? Nobody understands outside of Canada. And I mean, being in Alberta, I don't understand how completely blind to the facts and the truth parts of this country are.
Yeah.
But it's
Oh,
true. They don't know.
yeah. Well, it's so scary, and for me, I kind of call it uh, 1.0, and now I want to say 3.0. We've gone from the environment to COVID and shutting things down. But the key on all of this, though, to me, is the misinformation, the censorship, and the removal of the debate that is just it is brutal. But what we're doing to our children and indoctrinating them, and the fear mongering, like with little Greta, that she's not going to have a world to grow up in. What are we doing when she has no idea of the blessing of hydrocarbons and all of the products that's benefiting her and her family and humanity as a whole, but yet they want to shut it down. I got to read these other two quotes in here, but you have this in here. Why are large businesses allowed to build products with designed obsolescence? And why have they reduced, reuse, and recycle programs become so expensive and laborious? And then you go on to say, my father always taught me that I should never believe what a person says if their actions don't ally. Trust what they do, not what they say. And again, earlier in the book, you went into great detail of Trudeau and his jaunting around the world and everything else, instead of meeting over the phone, and the huge entourage that they take. But anyways, we've gone on an hour, Gillian. But is there anything that you'd like to share with the people? But I just want to say, you need to go out, you need to go to Amazon, you need to get this book, because it'll bring you from reluctance to saying, this is what we need to do. Alberta needs to stand up for itself. We need to gather our autonomy and prepare ourselves. And again, you go in the last part of the book, you lay out many of the steps that we need to take in order to become a sovereign nation. And for me, in the Wild Rose, you've got the blueprint here. This is what we need to do. We need to reclaim our autonomy. We need to be showing Albertans, give them the confidence that having our own CPP will be great. Having our own pension, or our own police force will be wonderful. Looking after the immigration, collecting the taxes, having our own environmental act that will actually care for and look after our land, our air, and our water. All of those things are so important. To have our own employment insurance program. There's so much more that we could and should go over. But anyways, awesome job. But what's the closing word you'd like to share with our viewers today?
I think the big thing is that I just want people to know that the book isn't very long. It's around about 100 pages, I think, depending on the format. And it was for the people. It was for you, so that you have something in your hand that you can refer back to and go, this is what is the problem. These are some of the solutions. It's not the end all be all. And I say that very early in the book, but it is a starting place where people can really get a hold of it and use it to explain to other people that don't understand, or just to inform themselves and know what the ins and outs are and the different aspects of what Wexit is all about. And even if it's someone who doesn't want to Wexit or gain sovereignty, it's at least something where you can look at it and say, okay, these are some of the ways that we can get control over our lives again, at least in some way. Because there's no guarantees, and we need to do it right. One of the things I also talk about in the book is what happened with the 1995 referendum in Quebec, and how one misguided statement has basically derailed Quebec separation, probably for generations. And we don't, if we want separation, even if we don't, but if we want separation, we really need to take the lessons from Quebec and the mistakes they've made and the successes they've had, and really use it to our advantage. So, and I hope that book helps people to see what needs to be done and the smart way of going about it.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. And I'll put in a biased partisan point here. I say whether you want to keep Canada together as a whole, or whether you realize that there's no fixing. This is a broken, dysfunctional relationship, and we need to be a sovereign nation. A Wild Rose Independence Party is the solution, because if you want Jason to be able to have any leverage, it'll be because the Wild Rose Independence Party is doing well, and therefore Canada might come to want to bargain with him. But and if you want to, and understand the importance of sovereignty, well, then the Wild Rose Independence Party is our pathway to a healthy, wealthy, and prosperous, safe country here in Alberta. But thanks, Gillian, for coming on. It's awesome that you wrote this book. It's so timely, and hopefully it'll help a lot of Albertans come to realize why we need to do what we need to do. But thank you, and thank you, viewers. And until next time, God bless.